Before we dive deeper into more about this wonderful world of data that you swim in, right? Let's just start to break it down a little bit for the non-nerds out there who are like, oh God, even this is a bit much, right? So in one simple sentence, what is data?
I mean, data is just information. As I mentioned earlier, data can be anything. It can be, the words you exchange with somebody. So it can be your chat history, for example, or data can be, how often you log, social media, how often do you visit social media, how much time you spent on it. Things like TV scripts, movies, all of these can be turned to data points. And I don't mean comparing movie to movie, but I'm talking about within a movie in itself. For example, people they've used computational methods to say take a screenshot of every second of a movie and then make some sort of calculation on how often you see a certain character get represented, or how how often do minorities in TV shows have airtime, for example. So even though they are casted, do they get a sizable amount of time to speak or show up on screen even? People have also analyzed text, books, for example, stories, famous literature pieces to analyze, understand how often certain words or phrases are used. So essentially, any sort of information that can be quantified, can be categorized, can be given additional values to, can be turned into some sort of data analysis or data point. Yeah.
So is it fair or accurate to just say data is fact?
No, it's not accurate to say data is fact because, and this is something I learned in history too, which I was very thankful for. Something that we learned is obviously there's this famous saying that says history is written by the victors, the winners, right? And so is data, right? So data is collected by those.
Data is collected by the winners.
No. I mean, yes, to some degree, but data is also collected predominantly by those who have power, right? Okay. So there is a power dynamic in the data process.
Is it what data the powerful choose to count?
Yeah, and there's always biases in the data collection process, and you can't collect. I mean, you can theoretically collect data about everything,
right?
But most people don't. So there is a degree of curation and calculation, and these are filtered views of reality.
Okay,
right?
so I'm going to pause you there just to make it simple for people to grasp, right? Because it's quite a big concept of putting out that it's the people in power who choose which data to track, right?
I mean, data can be collected by everyone, but often, the collection of data, that process is exercised by somebody who has a degree of power and privilege, yeah.
So say today I anoint you as the bigwig of Netflix.
Wow.
Right? and Netflix probably tracks a whole bunch of stuff. But let's say you suddenly become the power figure of Netflix. Going by your own interests as Anagram 8 or whatever, what data would you choose to track just out of interest?
Wow.
Just for fun?
This is hard. If I'm not Netflix, I'm working in Netflix, but I'm not concerned about Netflix goals, which is profit.
Right.
I suppose for me, it would be to see if, there is a demand for certain type of stories. So stories that maybe feature more diversity topics, stories that may have more, emotional resonance, for example. So I would be very interested to see if when somebody watches a film, where do they pause, and do they pause at the points where there is stronger emotional resonance, etc. Yeah. So that I also understand, I guess, from a sociological perspective, the impact that films have on people. Yeah, but you can also use that same data point for profits. Obviously, the bigger the emotional impact, the more people want to watch something. So you can use that insight to push more emotional content to them. Yeah.
And this is me judging myself. I'm almost embarrassed to admit that sometimes I just watch Bling Empire just for the heck of it.
Oh yeah.
No, it's terrible. But anyway.
So do I.
But based on that, I'm thinking I might be, and if I put on now my socially oriented hat, right? I would actually be interested to track how much time people spend on watching what I judgely classify as like trashy content, which I watch anyway, versus like more educational content. Like I know I should watch the nice nature documentary, but I choose to click on the other thing instead. And I would want to track actually how much time am I willing to waste on the world's behalf? Like, you know, if I was running a big TV organization, I might feel a bit like guilty, like, oh no, I'm making people spend like 900 hours on this stuff.
I mean,
not on the
would
other
you?
stuff.
But you'll be like making a lot of money. Yeah.
Okay. But you know, like so I think that sort of like brings home the point of actually what data do you choose to track because you want to make certain decisions.
Yeah, exactly.
And those are power decisions.
Yeah. But when car manufacturers test their cars, right? They usually test it on a male dummy.
Yeah.
Why do they not like test it on female dummies? Because like our bodies are very different and how we respond to an accident or a car crash is also very different. Like how heart attacks show up very different in women than in men, right? So in the data collection process, we also sort of make these, most of them are like, you know, I guess unconscious decisions. Like we don't realize we are excluding people in the process, but very often in the way we calculate something, we sort of, you know, accidentally omit people. And it also applies to, like, in an adverse way, sometimes to racial minorities or ethnic minorities. Like, especially in Singapore, we like to categorize certain types of data based on ethnic groups. And it may not be the best thing because that means that we are presuming that some trends have a racial undertone when they may not have that racial undertone. Certain racial groups might be more represented in certain things, but it doesn't mean that there is a correlationship between race and what's going on with them. Like it might be economic, right? But the tendency is to, you know, because we collect all these things, then we can filter the data set by a certain view. Then you can produce a little bar chart that says like, oh, you know, race group A is like struggling in the education system. Like you can see that like, you know, many of them don't move on to like the next level or the next step, for example. But that is giving that topic like a racial lens when it may not necessarily require it. Right. So there's, you know, data is power. How we use it and how we analyze it also makes a strong influence on how we govern things or how we, you know, decide things.